Welcome to another episode of What No One Tells You. I'm Chris.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we are talking about El Salvador.
El Salvador. Now, that was a country that I feel like nobody really knows much about, but everybody knows like the same one thing.
I mean, it's known for a few things, but mostly...
Lately in the news, it's been like their rapid crime vigilance. I guess like they are just like rounding up all these like, especially drug crime people, like
gang members.
Like they have like really put it under locks. But before we get to all that, let's do our whole little spiel. If you're new here, we are Chris and Sarah. We're travel podcasters. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe, go leave a review if it's positive. And
Sarah?
I think that's all. I know everybody's really shocked when I actually ask for the endorsements, but it really does make a huge difference. Like I don't think people realize like one review, an honest review, actually really helps you a ton on the podcast side. It helps you to be much more visible. One makes a difference.
And I know if people are watching the video podcast right now, they're like, aren't you driving this? Aren't you supposed to be in your truck? And yeah, we are driving it. And we're talking about our experience driving from Guatemala to El Salvador in this episode and talking about El Salvador. But the reason we're back home is we had a few work things back in the States. So our truck currently is down in Central America. We flew back home. We're like, hey, let's do a podcast while we're home.
Where we have air conditioning. Actually, we don't even need that because we went from, 95 degrees in Central America to it. I woke up this morning, it was 30 degrees with the hard frost outside.
Man.
Whew. That's the closest thing I've gotten to culture shock lately.
I don't know what's worse. I'm like, man, do I miss the heat without the AC or do I miss
I don't know. It's nice to actually kind of be cold at night. Be like, oh, I have to bundle up in the blankets in the bed. Like you can kind of fall into that squishiness of a bed and not be like throwing the covers off sweating. Okay, that's beside the point. Welcome to our podcast. We're going to jump right into El Salvador now.
All right, so El Salvador, it is the smallest country in Central America.
And it is the most densely populated, which kind of worried me heading into it because I thought, okay, small country, that's not a big deal, but densely populated. I mean, especially for people who prefer to be, I shouldn't say we prefer to be off-grid or like in remote areas because that's not true. We really love cities and rural equally as much. But I think when you hear like, ooh, densely populated, and you've already been to places like Mexico City and coming out of Guatemala City, those are so densely populated.
Yeah, Guatemala City, before we crossed into El Salvador, we were in Guatemala City driving south. Guatemala City was a nightmare.
That is the one major city I think I've ever been to, and I'm like, please never bring me back here ever again. And it wasn't because the people were bad or that it was ugly. It just was like the worst traffic I have ever in my life experienced. It took us, I forget how many kilometers it was. I want to say it was like 10 kilometers across the city or something like that. It took us like 4 hours. I mean,
crazy.
And being a stick shift and it being hot outside, thankfully it wasn't as hot as it could have been because it was like at elevation. So it's like 5,000 feet. So it brought the temperature down a little bit, but it was just like nonstop. Stop and go. It was like my leg was so tired from the clutch after Guatemala City. So like by the time we got to El Salvador, I was like, oh gosh, please let this be better. Hopefully like even though there's a lot of people, it won't be as overwhelming.
Yeah, and that was kind of our nightmare. We were like, oh, El Salvador, there's a lot of people here. It's just going to be just like Guatemala City. Thankfully, it was not.
No, I feel like the people were very evenly distributed throughout the country. So it wasn't like we went to San Salvador, which is the capital, and I never once felt overwhelmed by it.
Do you think the government did that on purpose? They're like, you
have to distribute population properly. I don't know. Probably not. But whatever the reason, it was very manageable. In fact, we crossed the border. Let's start with the border crossing. Mm-hmm. We crossed the border from Guatemala to El Salvador. Guatemala getting out was a breeze. I mean, it was just not low-key chaos. It was just pretty informal. They were just like, there was a time crossing the border where I could have just walked across and been a missing person because they had checked the car out and they let me by and I hadn't gotten my check out. Like I would have just been missing. I could have gotten stamped into El Salvador, but not checked out of Guatemala. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would have been, I guess, in two places in once.
Yeah.
It's very loose at the border.
Very loose. Like they're all, come on in. And then it was funny because when we walked into El Salvador or crossed in, they just had this like a little tent and there are two guys just kind of lounging there. He's like, welcome to
El Salvador. Except it was all Spanish, but like bienvenidos. But they were so chill. I guess their take on it is like, I guess their take on entering into El Salvador, it's like, I guess they just aren't that worried about people crossing in illegally, or I guess that's just not a big concern for them because they've got all their crimes so under wraps now anyway. So it's like, if you're coming in doing something illegal, they're probably going to find you.
And there's only so many different places you can cross. Like they only have, 2 borders?
I can't remember for El Salvador. It's at least going north to south on like the northern border. I think it was 2 borders.
I think it's just Guatemala and then Honduras.
So crossing, like when you get there, like we drove across the bridge, like you checked out of El Salvador, you crossed the bridge over the river. I don't remember the river's name, but like Chris said, there's a little tent there. There's 2 guys just sitting there chilling, and they were telling us first you go here, here, and here, which we knew the process. Like you pretty much like you check out of one place, you check into the next place, and you check your car into the next place. So we did, and everything was just like easy peasy. They took US dollars in El Salvador, which is super convenient.
In Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, the first country in the world to do that. And then it was just so laid back. The office was air conditioning. Getting Kramer in was a breeze. It was very straightforward. I just showed them the paper. There was no question about what to do. Even getting the truck in was just like so low key. And it wasn't that they weren't doing their work. It was just, it wasn't a busy border. And the guys and girls there working were just like super relaxed and friendly.
They
like,
were. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is that the El Salvadorian people are so nice.
Yeah, the Salvadorian people were really, like that border experience, like we're really leaning into that because that would really set the tone for the whole experience there of just like, I don't usually say like a border crossing is a good first impression to like, don't let that dictate your entire time. But like El Salvador ended up being true of like what we experienced at the border was true for the rest of the time there. It was very pleasant. And so we crossed over from Guatemala, and our first stop was Ruta de Las Flores, which is like Route of Flowers. And it goes through the mountains, sort of in the same area where the coffee's grown in El Salvador. And it's just this beautiful winding route through the mountains. It felt very remote for being a very densely populated country and very small. It was really shocking to me how like rural and how mountainous it got very quickly.
Yeah, Ruta de Las Flores is sort of like the Fruit Loop in Hood River, Oregon. It's, just this 20-mile road-ish road that you go through all these different villages, and they have beautiful flowers. Yeah,
it's just, we weren't really there at the perfect time of year because they say spring is more colorful. And we were there in I guess like late February. So it wasn't quite, February sometime. But I mean, considering its climate is getting pretty close to the equator, it was still really beautiful and green.
Yeah, it was beautiful. You saw some weird flowers you've never seen before.
Never seen them before. And I was just running around with my phone and the camera and just taking pictures of all these colorful flowers. I don't know that I'll ever do anything with them because they weren't great photos, but I wanted to remember that, wow, that flower was really cool. And I've never seen some of them again. Anyway, so the Ruta de Las Flores was really pleasant. We found ourselves kind of going through a couple of really small towns, which we happened to be passing through on a Sunday. And Sunday in Central America is like a family day, market day, go to church day. So everybody is out in Central America.
Everybody. Sunday is always the busy family day.
But it's really fun. I like that part of the Central American culture. So where a lot of people go to church and then they all go to the markets and get lunch afterwards. So there's like good street food happening. And we found ourselves kind of walking through some of the street vendors, and we got some food, and it was just a really pleasant experience. I think the only not so pleasant thing about it is actually one of, I guess, the selling points of the area is that there's a lot of like natural hot springs in the area. It's very volcanic, coming out of Guatemala, just a few miles away. Like there's tons of active volcanoes. But we stayed the night at this one hot springs place, which was
like in hindsight, we're not even in hindsight, what we were thinking about, we're like, this is nice because if you stayed the night there, then you get free access to the hot springs, which was cool.
It was like $10 a night to stay there, $15 US. Yeah. It was something pretty affordable.
But it was also like 95 degrees outside.
I don't know what we were thinking. It wasn't 95 because we were in the mountains, but it was still
it was hot.
Flipping hot. But, and all these locals are sitting there in these like steaming bath pools. Like it's absolutely nothing. And Chris and I are just sitting in the camper sweating. I'm like, that looks like hell right now.
I'm just looking at these people. I'm like, you're insane. Why are you in the hot spring right now? And I went and touched the water, and some of it was lukewarmish.
Yeah, but they varied,
Yeah, they varied. They varied in degrees. And it was nice. Like, honestly, I would probably go back to that if I had air conditioning and, like if I was I think it got busier at night.
It did get busier at night. They had like a day pass and then they had a discounted evening pass. So I noticed a lot more locals coming in the evening. And then like the tour buses dropped off in the morning. Like before we were leaving, we were breaking down camp for the day. They hosted campers there, which was really funny. We were the only ones there. Oh, that's where I was going with this is if you've never been around hot springs, they generally smell very strongly of sulfur, and sulfur smells very strongly, very similarly to like rotten eggs.
Yeah.
And we knew that. I guess I just wasn't paying attention, but 90 degrees mixed with the smell of sulfur, and you have no AC, so you have to sleep with your camper windows open all night. And it was really strong. Like we were right next to those hot springs, completely surrounded. It was a odorous evening.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very odorous. Kramer did not appreciate that. But it is what it is. It was a nice time.
Yeah, it was really pleasant. Like it was really shaded around, so it wasn't crazy hot for us, thankfully. But yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the map, we were like, all right, hey, we need to start heading towards San Salvador because we wanted to get to the coast. Because I think when people go visit El Salvador, a lot of people go to the beach. They go surfing. They do all that. And typically they'll fly into San Salvador. And being such a small country, we had to drive through it.
So this is one area I thought El Salvador was really cool from some of the other countries in Central America. The main city of San Salvador is like 30 minutes from the beach. And so when you fly in, like when we first got there, we were kind of confused. Like, oh, people are day tripping to the beach. That seems really far. But I wasn't wrapping my head around the fact that, geographically, they're actually really close together. And the roads in El Salvador are really nice. I mean, I think they're, for the most part, at least the main highways are like American grade.
Really nice.
Really nicely paved. We're going to talk about this more in a minute, but the infrastructure in El Salvador, you can tell they've really invested in improving that kind of stuff. But yeah, you could just drive easily between San Salvador and the beach. It was like 30, 45 minutes, I guess, if there's traffic. But San Salvador was a really pleasant city. So after Ruta de Las Flores, we went to San Salvador. We actually got a hotel for a night. Just because in cities, it's so hard to camp. So we just kind of were like, good chance to break out of the camper, get a real shower. So we got a hotel for a night. And San Salvador is a city I think you could pretty much experience in a day or two.
Yeah, there's a lot of shopping there. There's a lot of...
They like their malls.
They do
Central America.
Yeah, they do love their malls. They have a nice centro area. I will say one thing, and I kept telling Sarah this, because El Salvador was the one country I had been to before meeting her. And El Salvador, this is what I remember, has the best Pizza Hut.
He has hyped this up for me. How long have we known each other? 11 years
11
now.
years.
We've been together for 11 years.
The best Pizza Hut is in El Salvador. Just, I don't know how they make it, something in the water. I don't know what they do to that pizza, but it's really good. But I'm not the only one who thinks that. In fact, most everybody, if you go to El Salvador, you will see an abundance of Pizza Hut. But it's not just like this, hey, go on a Friday night, get it, come back.
Yeah, it's like an actual sit down. No, not fancy or anything, but it is like people go there for date night, which sounds so funny to think of Pizza Hut as being like a nice date night.
It's a nice experience.
But it's like, they are not like the dated, like not A-frame, but you know how the old Pizza Huts have like the slanted roofs and they all look like they're straight from the 70s and you have the salad bar in the middle where people are sneezing over it. Don't get me wrong. I loved Pizza Hut growing up.
Oh, yeah.
But this is like sit down. They have a hostess. Like you actually get to experience like a restaurant, which is so funny to me.
Did you grow up with the Pizza Hut reading stickers?
Yes, homeschoolers did get that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we did get that. We got the summer reading challenge. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you like read every time you read a book.
And then we got a free pizza.
Yeah.
I think that's why my parents made me read, because they wanted free pizza. They didn't want to pay for me.
And it was good motivation. We did that too. All three of us. Oh man, those personal pizzas. Okay, this is really this is segued into pizza more than
we're recording this right before lunch, by the way. So.
We are. I'm hungry. We haven't eaten breakfast. All right, so let's just the anticlimactic end of us talking about Pizza Hut in El Salvador is that we never actually went there. Chris was so bummed.
I'm still mad about it because we're like, oh, we're gonna save Pizza Hut for the next day, and the next day came, and we just kept pushing it off.
Well, we didn't want to do that in the city when we were going to the market and we were eating Papooseas and other street foods, and then like once we left the city, you go out of elevation back to sea level, and it was hotter there, and it was always too hot at lunchtime to leave Kramer in the truck. Like we wouldn't have felt okay leaving him there. If we were hot, he was going to be hot. But yet none of the Pizza Huts had patios either. So it just never worked out. And the whole point was to go in and like get the Pizza Hut experience.
I'm just very bummed. But you did mention something about El Salvador that we did have and is very good. Papooseas.
Chris is more of a papoose person than me. They're a little bit greasy for me.
Oh, who cares? Like the papooseas, it's this corn tortilla and they put beans and cheese, chicken, steak, whatever you want.
All sorts of. Well, yeah, not all at one time. I guess you could, but
that'd be the mega papoosa.
The mega papoosa. I got like a bean and a cheese. Those are the ones I usually gravitate towards.
But they eat it like papoosas are part of their daily life. You know, they'll go around. They're like, "Hey, I just need to eat a papoosa for lunch."
They're filling.
Yeah, they are very filling
and cheap.
And I think it was 60 cents for one papoose.
Yeah, and we each got 2 papooses, but I couldn't even finish that. But the locals, I guess they're more accustomed to being able to eat them. Like
they were down in 3 or 4.
Yeah, they were. To me, they were just so greasy. They were kind of sitting heavy for me, but they were good. But they just come out and they're fried and they're really, really hot. You've got to be careful. Kind of reminded me of like a Juicy Lucy in Minnesota.
A little bit. It's the Salvadorian version of a Juicy Lucy.
If you don't know what a Juicy Lucy, man, this podcast episode is gonna be all over the place. But just bear with us because El Salvador is a small country, so we have less to talk about as a whole. But a Juicy Lucy, if you ever find yourself in Minnesota, it's a burger where they inject essentially boiling cheese inside the burger. So instead of having a burger and then the cheese on top, it's inside. And they actually, people will get like
3rd-degree burns from it.
Yeah, like really bad burns. Like they warn you, like you can't just bite into this thing, and you have to be careful even when you cut into it, because if it's too hot or it's too pressurized, it can like squirt cheese everywhere. Which I mean, to me, like there's worse things than to be burned by cheese.
But I have never been told by the waitress, be careful. It's really, I mean, sure they'll say it about the skillet if you order fajitas or something like that. But she was like, wait 3 to 5 minutes before you take a bite. And I'm like, why did I order this?
It's a dangerous thing, but man, is it good. Gotta go to Matt's if you're in Minnesota. Anyway, okay. Back to the Papooseas. We went to a great little street market in San Salvador, in the capital. Had our papoose fill, and there was a really nice guy next to us. He could tell we were foreign, obviously. Not too many places.
Well, the camera's a dead giveaway too.
Yeah, that too. So he was really kind. He was like leaning over. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "Here's how you eat it." There was like this slaw stuff in a jar. It was like made of cabbage, kind of fermented, it was vinegaretted.
It did kind of remind me of
coleslaw.
Yeah.
It was like coleslaw. And then they had their hot sauces, different hot sauces, none of which are labeled by degree of hotness. It's just sort of like a trial and error.
Yeah, figure it out yourself.
But it's good. Like people, I could see how they're like good on the go, like filling inexpensive meals.
They are sort of like what's the thing from England? Pasties. They're kind of
Cornish
like
pasties.
It's like their version of a pasty a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about with one of our friends, Caroline. Caroline, if you're listening, you were the one who pointed out to us that every country has its version of a dumpling. You know, in Italy, it's like ravioli, and China, it's like actual little steamed dumpling. You know, like everybody has their version of dumplings, but I feel like they also have like their economical version of like a hand pie or something like that, where you've got your carbs on the outside and you stuff it full of like the protein and the veggies on the inside.
Yeah.
This is their version of that.
Yeah. But I think we forgot a crucial point of this story. Right before the Papooseas, since we're in a hotel, we got an Uber to go downtown. Sarah just spit coffee everywhere. No. So
I did not. I stopped myself.
So we grabbed an Uber, and the Uber. So again, the Salvadorian people are so very nice. And he was asking about what we were doing. We're like, oh, we're going to the market. And he looked at us and he's like, yeah, the market's fine, but you need to go to the library. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll go to the library. Two. But we wanted to go to the market because we were hungry.
And, you know, when you book an Uber, you choose your location in the map. So they're following the directions to this place. Well,
he decided to turn that off, and he dropped us off at the library, which is like 5 blocks from the market, which it just made us laugh because he decided for us, no, you don't need to go to the market right now. You need to go to the library.
This was not the only time where we took 2 Ubers. Well, no, 1 Uber, 1 taxi in El Salvador. Yep. Both were in San Salvador. One was to the market, one was on the way back. And both times the drivers were like, no, I take you here instead.
Yep.
Like
the second time was back to the hotel.
Yeah, right? We're like, this is the hotel, drop us here. He's like, no, I do it better. I go around and drop you off at the mall. I'm like, I don't want to go to the mall. I want to go to my hotel room. But he was very like, no, great mall. You want to go to mall. So like, okay,
the Salvador, they think that they know more than you, and they probably do.
They're just excited to show what they want to show.
Yeah. So our Uber driver dropped us off at the library. And honestly, he knew what he was talking about.
Okay. So this is a good chance to go ahead and talk about how El Salvador has really made this like 180-degree turnaround in the last couple of years. I don't know how long it's been going on, but I feel like if you've seen anything about El Salvador in the last few years, you've probably seen the same thing as us, where it's a lot of like gang members, like left and right, they're throwing people in jail. And the crime has gone from like really, really dangerous to like really, really safe now. And that's all I've seen in the news. So like I was kind of leery of like, is it still really dangerous since obviously they have a lot of crime there. But no, it felt so safe. Like they have
very safe.
Like most hard criminals are in prison now, and most people are thrilled about that. Obviously, the family members of some of those people are not so thrilled. But as a whole, it has done really good things for the country. People are wanting to visit now. They're getting a lot of digital nomads. They've taken a lot of money and started investing it into things like the library, which this library is almost entirely geared towards children.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 stories.
Yeah.
It's tall. But then they had these sections of, like they had Lord of the Rings. But then it wasn't just like Lord of the Rings. They had like Lego sets of Lord of the Rings and cardboard cutouts, and then they had a whole Star Wars section, and it had all these Star Wars books, and they had life-size stormtroopers, and they had a life-size Batman and Deadpool, and it wasn't like somebody had just printed it from their printer and pasted it. No, these were legit statues.
I don't know where they found this stuff, but I loved that it was not just books, which obviously a library is books, but in this day and age, I feel like kids need to be enticed to come in. Children are children. They want flashy. They want fun. They want things they recognize. So they had, like Chris said, Harry Potter, Star Wars, superheroes. They had princess stuff. I mean, they had everything you could imagine, but they had different sections where they had local children and even like college kids and high school kids in there playing board games and doing puzzles. They had a puzzle section. We could walk up and borrow a puzzle. They had computers and iPads, which, are probably less accessible to most people there. And they could come in and practice and learn. And so they're like, they can get all these different skills and, be creative. And it's just, you could tell that they're like, we need to invest in the education of the future generations.
Yeah. They were so proud of it. And when I came in with the camera, the lady was like, hey, we don't mind you taking photos and videos. We want you to, but please don't get any like photos of the kids, which is super understandable.
We try not to anyway.
We try not to do that. But that made it incredibly difficult trying to film in there because there were kids everywhere enjoying every section. So
it was really neat. And granted, that's like the main library. And it's on the main square right across from like I guess it's the presidential palace, and there's like a big cathedral across the street and a hotel, and like it's just like every city in Central America seems to have like that colonial square of all the main stuff, and this was theirs, and they put it right there on that square, which it serves as a great like advertisement to tourists like ourselves who are sort of getting our first taste of El Salvador. You can tell they want that to be a centerpiece. Like, hey, look what we're doing. And but yet it's all locals in there. There weren't other tourists really besides us who are walking around the library. So it was really nice to see that they've invested in that for their future generations. And then like on top of the library and the children, we noticed like nice playgrounds, new playgrounds in neighborhoods. We noticed the roads were really good. What else do we notice? We heard their plumbing like is getting better and better. Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's just like all these little things. They're not just like investing in, making like a beach town really trendy and hip, kind of like, Mexico did with Tulum to get a lot of tourists in. It's like, no, we want to invest in our people in our communities. And then naturally people will feel safer and intrigued to go and visit. And that was my impression of El Salvador.
Yeah. El Salvador has made so many strides to making great positive change. And we enjoyed our time in San Salvador. It was a very pleasant city to be in.
You're one of the few people who can actually compare and contrast like what it was like pre-lock, like walking down on crime to now.
I mean, it definitely felt when I was there, and this was many like years ago,
20?
like probably 15, 20 years ago when I was there, it felt more third world in that regard. When we were there this time, it did not feel like that whatsoever. I'm sure there are parts for sure,
no,
like any
country,
country, but it felt more. It actually this time around, it felt more Americanized.
It felt very American. That's my only critique. But I guess if I were in their position, sometimes American influence can be a really positive thing for a place.
Well, now it has tourists coming in.
It does have tourists coming in, but it had more American chains than any other country we've seen in Central America.
I mean, they had everything.
I mean, they had every food chain. They
Jimmy
had
John's.
They had stuff we hadn't seen in forever. I was like, I cannot believe that's here. It was just
kind of
surprising. Yeah, it was weird. But, for them, I guess that's a really good thing if they have American brands coming in, and I don't know. I really don't know the impact on that. There were still plenty of mom and pop places, so I don't feel like they were running them out by any means.
No. I saw a guy there with a Buc-ee's shirt.
Yeah, that was weird. He did take a picture of that and send it to me because he was, where were you? I think
He
he
was
went to
in
go
the
get
mall.
dinner or something. Yeah, and I was in the hotel. In San Salvador, there's also a really cool botanical garden. That was another area we saw that it was all, well, no, I should say all locals. There were a couple other tourist groups there. But we went into it and it was just this lovely little park. It was $1 for foreigners to get in. I don't remember if it was different for locals. It probably was. Most things are different for locals. But beautiful botanical garden. It had this awesome playground for kids. It was just like, they had a little cafeteria that served like local Salvadorian food. And, I think that was a Saturday that we went in there. Yeah, it was. And there were still a bunch of families out and it was so pleasant. Like you could tell people felt safe and they were enjoying where they lived.
Mm-hmm. And so we enjoyed our time in San Salvador. We really did. And then we kind of made our way to the coast, only 30 minutes down.
Yeah, went to the coast. It was hot. Surprise, surprise. But nice. El Salvador has nice beaches.
Very nice beaches.
Good surfing. They have a black sand beach. Again, this area is very volcanic. Pleasant little beach towns. I don't think there was really a beach town that we went to and we were like, oh man, like fell in love with this town. But I think they were all very safe and very pleasant feeling.
Very, very. Like we never once did I feel like, oh, we're going to get robbed or mugged or anything like that. It was, very safe. And so we spent a little time on the coast just hanging out at the beach. We knew that in our future, going to Nicaragua and Costa Rica, that we were going to spend a lot of time at the beaches. And so we kind of cut El Salvador a little short, only because we're like, all right, we're going to spend a lot of time at the beach. Let's just keep on going.
That's sort of the high point of a lot of the countries.
So we ended up at this little beach town, maybe about 30 minutes before the Honduras border.
I think town is a generous term because it was one dirt road and there was only one convenience store that was like in somebody's garage.
It's true.
There was no town. There were a couple mom and pop restaurants at houses, but that was it.
We really wanted to stay the night here. We're like, this is beautiful. Maybe we can, ask somebody if we can stay the night. And so we kept going down this road and there were different Airbnbs or hotels or whatever. And if I saw somebody, I'd be like, hey, could we pay you to stay the night? Or
let's preface this and say this is very normal for people like us. Like most people, like Overlander, people had marked places in this town where like hotels had said, Overlanders are welcome to come stay here at $10 a night or something like that. And you can use the pool and the beach and all this. Well, the ones we went to, the owners didn't happen to be there and the employees didn't know if they could say yes or no to us. So we ended up having to go hop from place to place and ask, which is super normal.
Yeah. So we're going down and everybody's telling us no, really. We're like, all right, we're just going to have to find somewhere else. And then I saw this gentleman outside his house and I'm like, I'm just going to ask this guy really quick. And he was so nice. He was like, come on in. And he like paved the way. He's like, come on. They lived right on the beach. And he was like, we have a shower inside. If you want to use it, enjoy yourself.
Yeah. It was a little husband and wife. They were probably our parents' ages.
Yeah.
Very, very sweet. They had a couple of dogs who were also very sweet. And we actually thought it was like a hotel or an Airbnb when we walked up to it because it looked like multiple buildings, which looking back, it was just his house and maybe a workshop or something. But we just didn't know. That's why we went up and asked him. We weren't just going to ask to sleep on his private property. But yeah, he was super hospitable. He's like, just pay whatever you want. I think he was going to let us stay for free, but we're like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to pay you. So we ended up paying him like 10 or 15 US dollars just because we were so thankful. And it was a really quiet place. And the beach was lovely. We had the entire beach to ourselves. I saw a giant turtle shell, like a sea turtle shell had washed up on shore. So it was just sitting there, which is really cool. If you've never seen a sea turtle in person, they're massive. I don't know where the turtle went. I guess it was gone, but the shell was still there.
So we really enjoyed our time in El Salvador, especially at this beach. Like it was pleasant and nice. And I think a lot of times when we're in the truck and we're traveling, if we find an easy place to camp, it's hard for us to film because we're enjoying it because it's just kind of easy. And El Salvador was pretty easy for us. Yeah,
I was going to go back and jump back to the other beach towns that we were in when we first left San Salvador. The names are escaping me, but they're the main beach towns right there. El Zonte is the beach, but there's a couple little towns right there on the main highway that goes down the coast that a lot of tourists hit up. But it wasn't for lack of for the towns that we ended up piecing out early. It was more of the camping situation. There weren't very good camping situations. Like the highway runs really close to the beach, and the one campsite we found, family was incredibly nice. But it happened to be on a hill, and there were semis going by with their compression brakes all night long. Like we were probably 100 feet from these compression brakes, and it was just so loud.
We were probably 100 feet from the beach too. I mean, like,
well, we were pretty close to the beach, yeah, but it was great. But it was just where the few campsites that were available were really close to the road, and so it was a little bit loud and a little bit busy. We weren't sleeping well, so we said, okay, we should probably, if we're gonna enjoy beach towns, like let's move on to Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama.
So if somebody were saying, hey, I want to go on a vacation, I want to go on a trip somewhere new, and they're looking at Central America and they pick El Salvador, would you suggest El Salvador, or would you be like, I would go somewhere else?
Depends on what kind of traveler you are. I think if you're a digital nomad or on a budget, absolutely, because compared to Costa Rica, it's very affordable. That being said, if you're looking for like a vacation and you want to stay like a really nice resort and you want, fine dining and that kind of thing, I don't think that El Salvador has that, at least as many options as what you're going to find in other places like Costa Rica or Panama. It probably exists. I didn't look into it that much. And we just stayed at a Hyatt Centric in the city. We got it for a great price, but I mean, pretty middle of the line hotel, very clean, good service. But, yeah, I'd say for people like digital nomads, a lot of like yoga and surfing kind of communities for digital nomads, like along the beach especially. A lot of that kind of stuff happening where expats are coming in because the internet was pretty good in El Salvador.
Yeah, it was. And I think you hit it. Like if you're into surfing, if you're into yoga, if you're into that sort of lifestyle, you probably will enjoy El Salvador. But I think if you're going there to go hiking or go explore volcanoes, they have some of that there.
They do.
But it's not... it's not as crazy as Guatemala.
Yeah, the volcanoes in Guatemala are more accessible and they're a little bit more dramatic looking. In fact, the ones that were in El Salvador, I don't remember the names, but they were either not open or they were like, because they were too active or they weren't active at the moment. Like there was something happening. And so it wasn't even worth our time to go all the way to these volcanoes, which was kind of a bummer. I think there was one outside San Salvador you mentioned. Oh, that's right. It was closed when we were there.
Yeah.
It was active.
And I have been to that one.
Yeah.
And there's like a lake up there.
Right,
and everything. Yeah. And so, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's not like Fuego in Guatemala. It's not like that. But
where there's lava coming out.
Yeah. But it is this beautiful lake, and yeah, it's crazy that you can technically swim in a volcano.
Yeah, so maybe it wasn't closed because I don't know. I for whatever reason, we couldn't go up there or didn't go up there. There was something going on. But yeah, I think El Salvador is definitely a place worth mentioning and worth visiting. I think the people were very nice. I know you said it. I know we keep saying this, but we've only mentioned one time how nice the people were, I think.
Yeah.
But they were very friendly, very hospitable, like most of Central America. But it seemed like a people who were genuinely excited about the future of their country. Like I think of any of the countries we visited in Central America, that one has made drastic steps in the last few years. And I think even the next 5 or 10 years, we will not recognize it for what it is. I think people are going to, as unfortunate as it is, I feel like a lot of expats are going to move in there and buy up real estate. We saw that happening already.
I want to go back.
I do too.
Because I want Pizza Hut.
Okay. Maybe we'll make that dream a reality.
Jeez, I was so upset. So
it was. I felt so bad. We were crossing the border the next day, like out of Honduras. He goes, I never did get my Pizza Hut. And I was like, it's a little late. We just got our passport stamped out. I'm sorry.
I was so mad. So, guys, that's El Salvador in our eyes. I recommend it. I think it's a great place to travel, especially a first country if you're looking. But we have a lot of interesting stories coming up in some future episodes.
Yeah. Oh, I want to say, though, that our friend James, if you remember, he was on our podcast. Gosh, when was he on our podcast?
A few episodes ago.
He has his own travel podcast and YouTube channel, and he spent time in El Salvador and absolutely loved it. I mean, he's been to like 50-something countries. He's been to more places than us and absolutely fell in love with El Salvador. And he has a lot of content about it. And he was there for longer than we were. So I think if you want a more detailed approach to like different things to do and see, he'd be a good one to go check out.
I'll link his stuff in the bio.
Yeah, he did a good job. Yeah, he got us really excited because he was there like 2 weeks before we were.
Yeah, he was like, you got to do this, that. Yeah, great stuff. So that's El Salvador. In our next episode, we're going to talk about a very crazy experience.
Yeah, we're actually going to go ahead and record that right now, but you have to wait another week.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.